Hello and welcome to this, what's going to be definitely a shorter tornado outbreak short summary, as we are going to be looking at very few tornadoes. This is the Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma tornadoes that happened in March of 1948, and specifically looking at how two USAF men would actually go down in meteorological history. These two men would be Major Fawbush on the left and Captain Miller on the right. They are seen here in 1951. Note that with this event, we actually only have two tornadoes to talk about, with the second one in particular being the most significant. Only the first one would cause casualties. We're only talking several injured. And also note at this time that the word tornado was banned by the Weather Bureau. It was determined by the Weather Bureau at the time that the word tornado would cause panic rather than action, which is, in my opinion, a mistake, as the word tornado does uh, can cause panic. Don't get me wrong, but for the most part, does signal that you do need to take action, not just just panic. Because there are things that you can do to protect yourself. But we are going to jump right into our two tornadoes. Our first one would happen on the 20th of March. This one was an F3. It would cause $16 million worth of damage, and like I mentioned before, only cause around several injuries. This tornado would take the worst path across the Air Force Base, crossing it diagonally, and would of course damage aircrafts along the way. That is seen here at this top right damage photo. I believe that those are B-29s. Those could be B-50s as well. It's hard to tell if it has an enlarged tail fin or not. I don't think it does. But in any case, this tornado would also shatter an air traffic control tower's windows, all of them, not just a few. And despite this, it would spare practically every single other structure on the Air Force Base. Now, just 5 days later, another F3 would take place. This tornado would cause $6 million in damage and would inflict no casualties, thankfully. It was noted by Fawbush and Miller that the forecast for the 25th was way too similar to that it was on the 20th. And so for that reason, they put out a forecast saying that, hey, there are possibly going to be tornadoes. This resulted in there being no casualties, as the base now knew that there is a possibility of this happening. This tornado again would miss all of the structures on the Air Force Base, very thankfully, and also had a much shorter path on the Air Force Base. This was the first successful tornadic forecast ever with the second tornado. This picture down here, the Miller Type B nor'easter, is the specifically on the left most, so the lows shown there is actually the type of system that most likely went through Oklahoma to cause those tornadoes, those two tornadoes. And again, just significant because this was the first successful tornadic forecast. In fact, the Weather Bureau would go on to use their forecasts just a little bit to predict severe local storms. This would eventually lead the Weather Bureau to create the SLES, or the Local Severe Storms Warning Unit or Warning Center, depending whichever one you want to call it. The SLES would eventually become the SPC, the Storm Prediction Center. To be fair, though, Fawbush and Miller's forecast was only successful partly due to chance, partly because they did notice that the forecast was similar to the day that on the 20th. But when it boils down to it, first of all, every tornado forecast is really just up to chance. You cannot predict exactly where a tornado is going to form. You can't say that a tornado will strike this town unless that tornado is striking the town right then and there. And number two is that to this day, we are still predicting tornadoes more or less in the same way that Fabish and Miller were back then, more than 50 years ago, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Um, of course, our understanding of tornadoes and understanding of weather in general has drastically improved, and so has our technology as well within that time period. So we are able to predict more accurately. So we're better at it, but it is still due to chance, which is why you can have like a high risk day, like what was it? I think it was May 20th, 2019, that ended up being a bust, which means that it just wasn't up to the expectation. These two men would actually go on for the next few years after 1948 to make 18 local forecasts around Oklahoma, and all 18 would be successful. And in some way, shape, or form, these were secret to the Weather Bureau, although not exactly, since the Bureau would use their forecasts again, more or less. So, take that as you will. It was also around this point that the Weather Bureau finally considered a tornado forecast system, which, well, they were adopting with the Bureau using the men's forecasts, and also a tornado warning type alert system, which would be, of course, put in place and then would actually be completely redone after the 1965 Palm Sunday tornado outbreak. And that, folks, would be all that I would have for this shorter video. But nonetheless, probably the most significant tornado of all time would be from March 25th of 1948, which was the first successfully forecasted tornado. Quite impressive, if I do say so myself. I hope that you all enjoyed this video and learned something from it, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.